All right, welcome everyone to our next panel of the day, A New Voice, which is our radio podcast panel. I am RJ Hensel. I am the co-president of Sport by NC. I'm a senior here at North Central studying sport management and marketing. Today joining us, we have Ryan Piers, a 2011 graduate of North Central and a play-by-play broadcaster and a network host of Gray Television. And then along with him is Ryan Sartori, who will be graduating here in a couple months, 2021, who's the play-by-play broadcaster here at North Central and also the co-host of the Missed Call podcast. So just to get started here, my first question for you guys is, how do you typically prepare for a game day? So let's start with Ryan Sartori.
Yeah, well, preparing for game days is still kind of a new thing to me. But one of the things that I've really started to master is the cheat sheet. And actually, I do have a game coming up tonight, so I've been working on some of it already. And that's a fun thing to do to familiarize yourself with the rosters and really do a deep dive on some of the statistics and things like that. The stuff that's going to help you get through the game, essentially, right?
And Ryan Piers.
Yeah, sure. So it's fun. And I like hearing, Ryan, how you do things at North Central. I remember back when I was at NCC, I did very little game prep. So I'm impressed that you've got all of that down. I would take like the information from Clark, our sports information director, and basically take that and use that content during a game. Now, though, it's very different. After I've been in the field for a while, it's changed dramatically. So it depends on kind of the game and where I'm doing it at. So I freelance for a handful of different companies, but generally, I try to prepare for about 2 to 3 hours for each game in terms of getting my cheat sheet, my shot sheet ready to go. I have I don't have one by me. I got like a flip folder basically. One side's one team, one side's the other team, and then on the inside I have all the bigger game information, what's at stake, what are some records, standings around the conference. So it takes me about 2 to 3 hours to kind of fill that out. I got the players, I've got their stats, I've got their information, I've got kind of my storylines that I'm going with. I try to do that the night before. So then game day rolls around. I'll try to get there about 2 hours early. If it's just radio, it's a little simpler in terms of setup. If it's TV, you'll get in with your color person. You'll chat a little bit. You'll chat with the producers. Maybe go down and talk to some players, some coaches, some pre-COVID times. Usually, depending on the network, about an hour ahead of time, there's going to be some sort of you shoot the intro. So those introductions you see like an ESPN or Fox, whatever it is, a lot of times they're not live. They shoot those ahead of time. They pre-record them because there's so many things happening at one time. That's like an hour ahead of time. Then within that next hour, you're kind of just settling in, re-looking at your notes, making sure you have your players down, and then you're good to go. So that's kind of the general format. Depending on the game, I mean, some days I'll prep the day before or prep the morning instead of the day before. So usually like 2 hours of prep. You get to the game 2 hours early at the very least. That's the basics that typically happens.
Yeah, and to build off that, if that's allowed, RJ.
Absolutely.
Or Robert, do I have to call you Robert here?
No, please call me RJ.
Okay. To build off of that, I know that obviously setting up for different sports is way different too. Basketball versus baseball is vastly different. And I too, last year when I started doing play-by-play, ventured into broadcasting on the fly, where they give you the information packet prior to you going on the air. Maybe you get 45 minutes with it before things really start to pick up. And that's always tough if you only have 45 minutes to really study a team and figure out who the key players are, what's at stake, all the things that Ryan was mentioning as he was going over it. So I started doing the night before, the morning of type stuff as well. But I think that basketball is a fun one to put together, and you can color coordinate and some things too. But with baseball, obviously you have the traditional scorecard and all that, and that's fun too. But
Great, yeah, thank you. It's really some interesting answers here. So obviously, with radio and podcast, you're really putting yourself out there. So what's an experience that you've had that originally made you uncomfortable, but in the end was rewarding? Start with Ryan Sartori.
Yeah, well, I think just doing play-by-play. Like it is a little uncomfortable at first, right? Like you hear it all the time. You watch sports, you think, "Oh, like I can do this. This is simple." But then you get there and it's very uncomfortable, and you don't know how to do all the intricacies and how to extend yourself for 2 hours or 3 hours, depending on how long the game is, and that can be really uncomfortable at first. But I definitely think it's paying off. I don't think that I've reached the complete payoff yet, but it's paying off. I'm enjoying myself and all that it has to offer.
I think for me, and I can definitely relate to that as well. I think for me was just networking, reaching out to people. In college, I didn't do as much as I wish I would have. After college, I started doing it maybe a year or two out, and just reaching out, cold calling people, getting in touch with them was something that took me a little bit of time to get comfortable with. When it actually comes to calling the game, when I switch more from radio to TV, when you do those like stand-ups right in the beginning, it's definitely a different experience, making eye contact with the camera, working with the color commentator, making them the star, doing everything that's in TV that's not in radio, because there really are two completely different games. That was a little bit of an uncomfortable transition at first, just because you're learning really a whole new skill set, especially with North Central being so good with radio. You get that really get those basics that are so valuable down with radio that translate, but then adding that to TV was a little bit uncomfortable at first, but you get used to it pretty quickly.
And kind of a follow up to you, Ryan, Piers. You kind of talked about networking. Obviously, it's something that's really important, and a lot of us, here graduating soon, it's something that we need to do. So, do you have any tips or tricks into how you did what you did, network?
Yeah, that's been the huge thing for me, and that was something I kind of learned afterwards about the value of it. So, really, for me, I guess the first thing I would say is find your crew, find like 4 or 5 people you really trust to give feedback, to give you some insight into the field, and treat them really well. Don't need to email them, every month or every 3 months, but make sure you hit them up on the holidays, send them a card, be in touch, be friends with them on social media, maybe like a post, that kind of thing. And then just have your schools, your networks, whatever you're looking at, have a big list of them, and cold contact, emails, phone numbers. For me, I think it was like 2014. I don't know if I'd recommend this, but I contacted every single Division I sports information director in the country, and it only led to 1 or 2 things, but then those built onto something else. So that's a big one. Cold contacting people. You don't want to be a pest, but if you have somebody that will email back and say, "Hey, we don't have anything right now. We may have something in the future." Maybe email them every 3 or 4 months, maybe twice a year. You don't want to blow that up, but keep them on the line, let them know what you're doing, and really try to treat them like a relationship. I mean, if don't just email them for, "Hey, do you have any openings?" But email them if you see maybe the school doing well or their network doing well.
Yeah, I think that's something that even I haven't reached that point of uncomfortability yet, because I'm still allowing it to be uncomfortable for me. Ryan is like, how do I tell somebody, "Hey, hire me," right out of college,
Sure.
and the reaching out process to people is uncomfortable. I think that that's kind of universal.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of when I read like the responses from different people in the industry and what they're working with, that's very relatable. I mean, right out of college, those early 20s, it's an uncomfortable experience to try to reach out to people, but I think you get more comfortable over time, and the more once you get a couple people that are kind of in your corner, maybe that are in the area in Chicago, wherever you might live, that helps out a little bit too. But again, I think the most important thing is treat them like a friend, treat them like a good contact, not just somebody that's going to give you a job. You want to form a good relationship with them. That's respectable.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's definitely very insightful. A lot of us graduating here soon, we could definitely use some of those tips. So moving on to my next question. Obviously, in the radio podcast, it's not, ever changing. A lot has changed within this past year as well. As long as as with everything. So what is something that you are most looking forward to in this upcoming year? We'll start with Ryan Piers.
For me, I think just getting games back. My number of games, like a lot of people in the industry, have drained a little bit, and Wayne might be able to get more insight into this too. when he pops on. But I think a lot of people in this industry, their games are kind of drained a little bit. It just depends on kind of where you're at. I think getting a lot of games back is what I'm most looking forward to. I fly down to Fort Lauderdale to call soccer games. We couldn't do that last summer. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I think that's probably the biggest thing, getting back to normal, then kind of seeing what happens from here. I think every industry probably will change a little bit. We'll learn more over the coming year what sports broadcasting is going to look like post-pandemic. And I'm just fascinated, like everybody else, to kind of be a small part of it and to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the answer for me too, right? Is like just getting games back. I know when the world kind of stood at a standstill, what was it, March 17th of last year, March 13th of last year, where essentially the world ended and everything that was normal to us was taken away. I mean, if we bring that to North Central, right? We were a couple days away from being in the Sweet 16 for men's basketball. At that time, baseball was ranked third in the country, right? Like there was a lot of good things happening. Myself as a broadcaster, I was very excited to follow both of those teams through their early spring and into to late spring, obviously. And you know that was something that sucked, but I'm really excited to be getting just even anything back at this point, right? Like we only got to call 12 basketball games this year, but calling 12 games is way better than calling no games and sitting at home. And we get 33 games of baseball and softball this year at North Central, and I'm elated about that. So I'm very excited for that. I'm looking forward to that in a big way.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, let's get games back, right? I mean, that's definitely what we're all hoping for here. So something that's important to probably a lot of us is looking up to someone in the industry. So my next question for you guys is, who is your biggest hero or idol in the radio podcast industry? I'll start with Ryan Sartori.
Sure. I think some of my biggest heroes are just some people here locally, right? Like growing up a Cub fan, I was treated to being able to listen to a guy like Pat Hughes my entire childhood and even now. And he influences at least some of what I do, right? I think it's good to learn from a legend. But I think also Ryan and Wayne are great people to look up to as well, because these are guys from North Central that are doing what I would like to do with my life, and that's really important. So definitely not sucking up to these two, but it's important to pay respect to your OGs.
No, that's nice to say. Yeah. I think that's a good answer. I think I'm kind of in the comparable situation where I don't know if I really have one person I've always looked to as one person I look up to, but I try to pick and intake from different people. I got a couple people that have been in my corner kind of for a number of years, and I used to listen to Wayne's content when I was back in college, and then I followed him as well as a number of people since then. In terms of like a style, I love Kevin Harlan. He's incredible. I think he's an amazing broadcaster, but I mean, that's such a tough style to emulate, and he's so insanely talented. And there's stuff that I'd like to take from him, but I know it wouldn't work for me like it does for him, of course. And but there's been different people that I've just past employees or employers rather, and people that have taken a chance on me have been really kind.
I think another name that I'll throw out there, and this always raises the eyebrows of many out there, is Joe Buck. I love Joe Buck. I think he's tremendously talented and one of the best big game callers in America. But that always gets some eyebrows from people because they're like, well, don't you remember, I mean, any number of calls from his early career when he was still learning how to broadcast. But I think now he's somebody that any young person who's looking to get into sports broadcasting can look up to, especially if you're doing play-by-play.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so something that kind of you've both touched on, I've touched on a little bit, is kind of the ever-changing, ever-evolving industry. So in what ways would you like to see change within the industry? And then kind of a follow-up to that, or anything you'd like to see that stay the same? We'll start with Ryan Piers.
Yeah, so we're kind of in an interesting part, I think, for not just sports broadcasting, news, really everything in media. I think the good and the bad is kind of the same answer. I think having more media outlets is exciting. And let me know if I get an echo coming from me. I can try to fix my microphone. But I think a lot of like the podcasts, the Barstool Sports. I think things like that are good for the industry. It gives more people a voice. It gets more content out there. It can reach more people. I think there's also less of maybe a guard on those type of outlets. So maybe the content might not be as professional, maybe a little more factually inaccurate. So I think there's good and bad with that. I like the direction we're going in terms of more contents digitally, more content's easy to reach, but there's also the challenges that come with that. Making sure that it's still quality content, not just from the talent of the people. I think a lot of people like at Barstool, for example, are very talented, but in terms of the factual accuracy, the moral integrity, maybe is, I don't know if that's the right word. I'm making sure that's still intact. And then making sure people can get paid. I mean, I think being able to access the New York Times, the Washington Post, whatever, very quickly is wonderful, but you got to make sure those quality journalists get paid. And then not just at the national level, but the local level, of course, local TV, local papers are having money issues across the country. Very valuable to have those as a safeguard of a local community. It's great that they're accessible, but making sure that people can still pay them and they able to hire a good staff, I think is really valuable. So technology is helping. It's also creating issues. I like the direction of the field, but certainly there are challenges that come with it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like everything Ryan says, I echo. I really do agree with a lot of that. I think you could do a whole seminar just on how Barstool is affecting the media industry as a whole. I like the fact that in some ways there's an elimination of gatekeepers. For so long, there were such big and prominent gatekeepers that kept smaller voices out, and now what we're seeing over the past 5 years, 10 years, if you want to go back that far, is anybody has an opportunity to get a voice for themselves, right? So I'm the host of two podcasts, co-host I should say, and that's not something that I could have done if I went to school when Ryan, did you guys have podcasts? I sound like
it was just budding. So I remember when I graduated, that was kind of when podcasts were getting big. We started some kind of like podcast like items back in college. We were putting our content on the YouTube, which were basically podcasts. I think like maybe the big boom was right after I graduated though. I think the first one I listened to This American Life was a big podcast when I was in college. It was kind of one of the OGs. I listened to the Starters. They were called something different. They're an NBA podcast. They were kind of a pioneer at that point, but so they were just getting big as I was in college and graduating.
And it's still super interesting that a lot of this is still growing and developing, right? Like I feel like for at least some time that there was some stagnant water when it came to broadcasting, and things were getting old, and this was almost like a shot in the arm that was necessary. And it is important, but you also have to go back to the factual integrity of things, right? You look at a company like Barstool, who really is just like, well, throw content at the wall and see if it sticks. And that wall is really messy because there's a lot of stuff that does stick, but look at the base, look at the floor as well. There's a lot of stuff laying down there too. There's so many different tangents that you could go with how podcasts and new media, right? It's not just podcasting, it's new media in general. Like think about how Twitter is influencing things too. And we saw it play out just the other day with the incident with Tiger, right? Like Tiger gets into a crazy car accident, and immediately everybody wants to be the first to do it. We saw it with Kobe too. You can go all the way back to Kobe's passing last year. Something tragic happens, and immediately everybody's like, I got to be first. I got to be right. I got to get the information out there. And that leads to chaos. And you have to think about just factual integrity. I think that's the tangent that I'll take it on. But overall, I think it is good, but we're still learning how to mold this thing into what we want it to be.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of talk about podcasts here, kind of rolling in, with my next question. With the growth of podcasts, how do you think that this has or could have an effect on the radio industry? Obviously, I feel like it already has. So, any insight you have into how you think it has affected the radio industry? I'll start with Ryan Sartori.
Well, it's interesting because, even if I just talk about it on the radio station with our manager there, Zach, he'll tell you that what you do on a podcast is not the same thing that you do on radio. There's a difference. I'm sure Ryan could probably fill you in a little bit better on that difference than I can. I'm still learning about it, but there's a lot more freedom that you get when you go with a podcast, right? You're not governed by the FCC, which is huge. You can curse, you can do out there stuff, right? That you're not necessarily going to get on the radio. And I don't know how important that would be for a specific person. Like, oh, do I really need to hear, F this or the S word or whatever? Like whenever I'm listening to my sports or whenever I'm listening to my news in general, do I need that? Not necessarily, but it can make it funny. It can make it more entertaining. I think that's a big difference. But I don't think that podcasts are necessarily affecting radio. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can't say definitively with empirical data, but they're their own separate thing and they grow and evolve in their own ways. And so in that way, I think podcasts I think they're running parallel. I don't think that they've intersected quite yet, but I could be wrong. And I'm interested to see what Ryan has to say.
Yeah, I think that we'll probably get a really good idea maybe in about 10, 15 years, maybe over the next decade. I think maybe an older audience still definitely listens to radio. When you look at the numbers, there's still a good amount of people listening to radio. I think the question will be kind of that 35 and under age group. Are they going to navigate more to podcasts and abandon radio? Or are they going to try to do a little bit of both, like maybe like an audience 35, whatever the age line is doing? I mean, I don't know if I have the perfect answer for it. I think the concern for radio would be podcasts are more specific to a topic, and people may gravitate more to that instead of putting the radio on in the morning while they're driving to work, whatever it may be. I think podcasts do give radio people a chance to expand into another environment. I think podcasts have done a great job bringing back audio storytelling. That's something that was really dying when I was in college when we were doing our radio documentaries. I think a lot of us were concerned, how will this benefit us? Because that's not something that we saw outside of maybe NPR back in college. Now you have them all over the place. So I think the importance of audio content has drastically changed since I was in college. It felt like it was dying. And podcasts have, to an extent, brought it back to life. Now, the question will be, has it also helped radio, or will it help bury radio, I think, in the future? And that's what we're kind of waiting to see. I do think podcasts are very beneficial in the sense that they make audio content, once again, hugely important. When there's kind of a lull, there's a period where I think it was dying, maybe back about 10, 15 years ago. People thought radio would go with it. Now it's just a matter of, I think, will radio join podcasts in this interest in audio content, or will it start to fade away? I don't know. I think that's something we're going to watch for over the next 10 to 15 years. I think if you look at ratings, like live game broadcasting and radio still does very well. What Wayne does for the Mets, baseball play-by-play is still huge, and that's why those guys are probably the most heralded and coveted of jobs is baseball play-by-play on the radio. But I think that will be around for a while. But potentially the morning DJs on music stations, and we just saw in Chicago, I think NPR, their morning show was #1 in the ratings for the first time, and the music stations are starting to fall off a bit. They'll be around. I just think it varies in the form. I wanted to touch on, I think there is, though, a huge difference in terms of what you say for a podcast and for radio, because radio is much more of an art. You have your 5-10 minutes, and then you got to get people to stick with you through the commercials. So there's that art part to it. There's the ratings where people have their trackers on, and you got to try to play to them somehow. You got to try to find that 25 to 50 audience that's really coveted. For podcasts, I think you just want your bulk listens, who's tuning in. And I'm not an expert, but Steve Masick would be the one who would be great with this. But podcasts, I think you just look at that general listenership. So there's definitely a different art to the two.
Yeah, I think that's so well said, Ryan. Like it is completely different. I was going to ask, when we think about ourselves as broadcasters, we are essentially independent contractors, right? We are our personality. We have to sell ourselves. I think to an extent, podcasts are a tremendous way of building your personality and marketing yourself to whoever thinks that you're good enough to call their sports.
I think podcasts are phenomenal, and I wish they were more popular when I was younger. I think it'll be interesting to see the long-term impact on actual radio, but I think as a form of content, in a way you can put whatever you're trying to get out there, I think it's great to see the development of podcasts over the past decade.
Wayne, can you hear me? Are you able to join us? Looks like we're still probably having some technical difficulties. So I'll continue the kind of this podcast talk. There's been a lot of talk about this kind of podcast bubble. When's it gonna burst? There's a joke nowadays that everyone has a podcast. So I'm curious, whether you guys think when is this gonna happen, and whether this bubble is gonna burst. So I just kind of hear your thoughts on the future of podcasting. I will start with Ryan Sartori. I know you've got a couple podcasts. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, the bubble is an interesting way to think about it, right? I don't know, because there is already so much content out there. Like you're right, everybody does have a podcast. At least I think everybody should, because again, it's a great tool to market yourself and bring out your personality. When do I think the bubble will pop? I think eventually, for any medium, all the things can be done, right? If you think about like late night TV, for example, like all the things there, I think have kind of been done. They can do different plays on things here and there, but like how many people do you know adamantly tune in to Jimmy Kimmel every night? Not many, but years ago, it was so important to tune into Johnny Carson, right? So there was a bubble that popped there. I think when this medium stops entertaining and stops serving that purpose of being that new cool thing, and it's run its course, I think that's kind of when the bubble pops.
Fair to say. I think it'll be interesting to see over the coming years when everybody starts getting podcasts. More people are doing podcasts. I mean, clearly, they're very popular now. I think will the market get oversaturated to an extent where people just start tuning out, or will it be so hyper localized where it may be like music, where everybody has their specific niche, their artist that they're listening to. I think it'll be around probably for the rest of our lifetimes, at least some sort of form of it. I mean, this is a new form of media, and I think it's going to be around for a very long time. I don't know if there will be a time when it pops. I think that's probably the best way to put it, though, Brian, is it'll just be around like every other form of media we've had until people start to find something they're more interested in. And it'll just be interesting to see if we have such an oversaturation in the market of podcasts, and I think we might be even getting there now. To what extent will people find it economically valuable to even create one, or will they try to do something different? I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch over the next couple of years, 10 years, whatever it may be, to see how it evolves and develops.
Wayne, can you hear me? Maybe not quite yet. Sorry about that. We're obviously, this is our first virtual conference here. So kind of moving back into play-by-play. Do you ever re-listen to any of your broadcasts? And if so, what do you look for? I'll start with Ryan Sartori. If you got a smile on your face.
Well, so obviously I've been saying through most of this, like I'm pretty new to the play-by-play world, and I do listen back to a lot of the things I do, and there are some things that I catch about myself in the moment where I was like, can't do that anymore. And then there are some things that you don't catch until afterwards, and you have to go back and listen and say, well, that didn't work well whatsoever. You thought it was clever, or maybe you thought it sounded well, throwing it all together. Sometimes that just doesn't happen. And I think there's a certain part of your brain, at least for me anyway, so far, where when I'm speaking like this, or when I'm speaking to a friend or a colleague, and there's not a microphone on, it comes much easier. But when the microphone's on, when you're broadcasting the game, there's like a certain part of the brain that just turns off, and that, oh, this sounds right or this doesn't sound right part. That's what goes for me anyway. And so I go back and I listen for things like that. And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised, and sometimes I'm miserably surprised.
I think I can relate to that. I think that doesn't really change over time. I know for me, what I've looked at when I've listened back to my stuff or watched my games over again if they're TV has changed over the years. And now I've got a couple coaches that I work with, or at least one that I do regularly, and I'll send him the content, and then he sits with me for like a half hour. Now it's virtually, and we go over some stuff, and we pick different way my voice inflects or how my tone is at certain points. You have to. I think it's like anything else. Like a painter looks at their painting afterwards, a musician listens to their music. When you create something, you have to look at it, and I think you'll. There we go. I think you'll be your worst critic sometimes, but you'll still miss things that other people can catch, especially people like Wayne that have been doing it for a very long time. And it's good to not only watch it yourself, but of course get feedback. I would recommend you not just send it out to like maybe a group and say, "Hey, give me some feedback, critique me." Because you may get people that are more amateurs or just fans that don't quite know what to look for. The best thing I think to do is to find a couple people you really trust and say, "Hey, can you listen to this? Can you watch this?" And get back to them every couple of months or maybe every 6 months or so. And they can give you maybe the best barometer as opposed to just mass sending it to like 30, 40 people and just see what random comments you get back.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot that goes into it. So, kind of moving things along. Let's start from kind of the beginning. I think something that is interesting is why you want to get into this play-by-play radio industry. So why what made you want to do it, Ryan? If you want to talk about also Ryan Sartori, why you started your podcast, kind of what went into that, some of the decisions you made along the way. So we'll start with Ryan Sartori. Why did you start your podcast, and also why do you want to do play-by-play? So if you want to go ahead and start that.
Sure, I'll start with the podcast because that came first. That was just a way to kind of start working on the muscle, right? Like the voice, I think, is a muscle that has to be worked constantly, and you have to go through those mental exercises all the time to make the words fit, right? Sometimes I think of it like a puzzle to put all the words together in the right way. And that's kind of why I started the podcast. Also, as a creative outlet for myself, sometimes you get thinking about things, whether it's regular everyday life or whether it's stuff that's happening in the sporting world as well, that you just feel like you got to get something off. And that was a really great way to do that. When it comes to play-by-play, I had gone through a bunch of different phases where I thought in high school, I'll be a journalist. That's what I'll do. I was the sports editor on the school newspaper, so I'll do this forever and it'll be great. And then it got boring. And then I thought I'll be a podcaster forever. And I like doing podcasting, but it doesn't click that spark for me, right? Last year, I had the opportunity to travel with the North Central baseball team to Port Charlotte, Florida, and travel with them, call their games, get to know the guys, and it felt like something completely different, something that it felt like a labor of love in a way. Like I was doing it, and I loved doing it, and I never wanted to do anything else, and I hope that never leaves me. But for right now, play-by-play is the thing for me. I'm blown away by it all. I love it.
It's tough to beat that live play-by-play game experience when you're in your zone and you're just doing the game. I wanted to do that since I was like a teenager. That was always my goal, and it's been fun to do that. As I've gone on my career, it's become very much a freelance thing. For not just myself, I know a lot of people, that's kind of how they've worked their play-by-play career, which I've liked because back in time, more interested maybe in a lot of news coverage and in news reporting, but I kept the play-by-play interest and the sports interest too. So I'm kind of in the same spot I was about Ryan, what you're talking about, kind of experiencing different things and trying out different things and experimenting. I'm still there almost 10 years later after college. I've just kind of taken a couple different routes and try to make them work well together. But my real interest when I was a kid was I want to be a play-by-play broadcaster, and I've enjoyed the ride. It's been lots of fun seeing the industry change, and I'm not sure how long I'll go. I could go my whole career. It could be a thing I go in and out of. It could be something I focus completely on. I'm just kind of trying to figure that out now. But that was always my dream as a kid, and it's been a lot of fun to live that out. And I think when you're like younger, I want to be like the next Joe Buck or the next Kevin Harlan or Bob Costas. And as probably not just for media, but for a lot of things that's in the public eye, politics, being an actor or actress, You want to be the next, Jennifer Aniston or whoever it may be. But there's a lot of ways to achieve that dream at different levels, and then maybe over time you hit that point where you do make it big. But I think it started for me as a teenager. It's just something I've kept up with.
That's something that I've been thinking about a lot too, Ryan, is like, everybody would love to be Joe Buck or Pat Hughes or pick your guy, right? Everybody, I would love to be that guy. But if I'm doing the thing, if I'm calling sports, that's it, right? Like that's what I'm looking for. Sure, it'd be great to do it at a major league level, but it's a rush, man. It's like I don't know personally, but it's like a drug high.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely really interesting. And then moving along now. So there's obviously this line, you have a voice for radio. So I think I'd be curious to hear from you guys. Do you think that you really have to have, this common voice for radio in order to be successful in the industry? We'll start with Ryan Piers.
I don't think so. I mean, it helps. I think a lot of, especially maybe for play-by-play, especially. But I don't think it's definitely a necessity. No, this might be an apples to oranges comparison. I always thought it was like playing a really good instrument, like you're playing a really good trumpet. Just because a trumpet's $5,000 doesn't mean you're going to be a great trumpeter. It's not quite the perfect comparison, but I think there's some truth to it. You have the great instrument. You got to learn how to play. There's so many fundamentals, especially in play-by-play, radio, TV, whatever it may be. You can have the best voice in the world, but if you don't get the fundamentals, you don't know how to work with your color commentator, you don't know how to pinpoint the ball or give the score at the right time or set up a scene. You're not going to, it's not going to work out for you. So I think having a great instrument, having a great voice definitely helps. I think, but it's definitely not a necessity. And I think play-by-play really helps. But a lot of other fields, being a podcaster, being a TV host, there's a lot of guys. I mean, there's so many names you can think of that they have decent voices, but they're very good presenters. They have good charisma. So there's a lot of factors into it.
I would like to say that you don't need a great voice because I'm aware that I don't necessarily have a phenomenal broadcaster's voice. Definitely, I'm being overshadowed by Ryan Piers and his voice. He has the broadcaster voice, right? But for me, it's not there. I try to force it sometimes, but then you ruin your own integrity of being yourself, right? So I hope you don't have to have one to be a good play-by-play guy, but that will remain to be seen, I suppose.
No, and I think it even takes time to develop, but it's something that you can work on, and it even you don't necessarily even need it though. I think it helps out, of course, but being conversational. I mean, there's so many people, the Ian Eagles in the world. I don't think he's got necessarily the best voice. There's a lot of people who have very high pitched voices that still make it in this industry that I think have done very well. It's a matter of how you use it in the end.
So I have one more question for the both of you. We'll kind of end it on something exciting, looking towards the future. So my question is, what excites you most about the future of sport? We'll start with Ryan Sartori.
So I think of myself as a stitch head, and that's like a baseball guy, right? Some people don't know that term, but what excites me about the future of sports is that, number one, we're allowing athletes to show their personalities. And even though baseball might be behind the times a bit, it's coming. Like we saw it last year with Fernando Tatis. Yes, they made him apologize for a 3-0 count grand slam, but it's still like there are plenty of other agents in all of this that are allowing him to do that. I think he's on the cover of MLB The Show, and he's been allowed to kind of lean into all of the personality that he showed last year, right? We should have more of that. That's exciting and that's fun. And that's something that in the future of sports, I'm very excited for. Another thing that I think is important to note is that while we're allowing these players, these athletes, to be themselves more and more, it's become more and more important for them to share their struggles, right? And we saw this past year with Hayden Hurst, the tight end for the Atlanta Falcons, that includes talking about mental health. And something that I think has gone really untalked about in sports is the mental health of these athletes. But that's now coming to the forefront with guys like Hayden Hurst, Dak Prescott, and a host of others. That's really important, and I'm excited for how that can not only impact athletes' lives, but male lives in America as well, right? Because if they see their heroes opening up about mental health and saying, I'm depressed and I have anxiety, well, then maybe other males in America will do the same thing, and that's wildly important.
And Ryan, that was legit. Yeah, I'm right there with you. That was really well said. I agree. I think that's a cool part is the de-superhuman. How would I say this? De-superhumaning of athletes. Like we don't look at them as these, gods anymore. Look at them as people that are very, very good at sports, and they should be admired for not just their talent but their character. And I think you're exactly right. Allowing them to be open about their struggles can help people who are also going through the same thing. And we've seen LeBron James, what he's done with social justice, being a big conversation opener. Obviously, the big one's Colin Kaepernick. But I think being kind of a conversation starter for a lot of different things and making people be more comfortable in their own selves is something that athletes can do. It goes, I think, for anybody who's in that public spotlight, but now that they have their own little personal microphone, I think they can do a lot of good just by humanizing themselves and saying, look, we're here, but we have these issues. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to be comfortable with it. And Ryan brought up a couple of NBA players like the DeMar DeRozan, the Kevin Loves who have talked about their anxiety and their depression. I think that's really pushed that conversation forward. But there's many different discussions that these athletes have done a good job. I think in recent years with the improvements in social media, to be able to get the word out about it, done a good job with it. And that's what I'm also very excited to see the development of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Ryan Sartori, Ryan Piers, we appreciate you guys joining us. We want to thank all those attending. So next up, this is our last panel of today. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., we will begin with our Game of Numbers analytics panel. We hope to see you all then. So thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. Hope to see you guys soon.
It was an honor. Thanks for having me, RJ.
Thank you.
Thanks, RJ. Really appreciate it. And thanks, Ryan. I appreciate talking with you too. That was you had the podcast and the way you deliver is so ahead of your time. So it was good hearing what you had to say.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you guys.
See you guys.